Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. I'm at the Encanto Country Club right outside San Salvador in El Salvador. This place is amazing. Tennis court, swimming pool, great clubhouse, great food, and we're having a great time. You can buy a residence here. You can live here. And I'm just mentioning this because I'm kind of in a daydream now, thinking of myself living here in the Encanto Country Club. My God, Stacy, what a dream that would be.
Of course, this is Bitcoin land in El Salvador, so there are a few places that all the Bitcoiners live. San Salvador, Bitcoin Beach, and here at Encanto, where you can find them. Encanto, where you can find them. So Max, speaking of Bitcoin land, we had quite an amazing event. The other night, we went to Nueva Biblioteca Nacional, which was the National Library being built with funds from China. But we got to meet President Bukele. And here is a little clip taken by somebody in the crowd who watched this happen.
Happy February 1st.
And so we were in that crowd. Obviously, we got to meet the president. And right before that moment, when you see all those crowds of people all around us, Bukele had run into downtown San Salvador, out into the crowds, people cheering. I'm going to show you a clip of just like how popular he is, because he went out there on his own, just like ran out there, and the people were cheering. So it was quite remarkable to be there and to witness this firsthand.
That was my first contact with President Najib Bukele. And, you know, it's amazing because immediately what I picked up on was a man with a vision who was very confident in the success of that vision and was can afford, in a sense, of being very humble. He's a man that is completely comfortable with everybody in the crowd, on stage. He's just a very interesting man.
Well, it was a fascinating event, and it was fun to attend. And, you know, things are happening as boomtown here in El Salvador, thanks to the Bitcoin law and hyperbitcoinization. I always say Bitcoin plus Bukele equals boom times in tourism, right? There are thousands of tourists here because of the Bitcoin law and Bukele. But, you know, one thing I want to talk about in terms of hyperbitcoinization and why it's better to be hyperbitcoinized than, you know, hang around in those last days of fiat. Here's a headline that actually, there's a line in here that makes me think of how bad the fiat system is. And then here's the headline itself: why Elon Musk and Joe Biden both love electric vehicles but can't stand each other. There is a legitimate question as to why Biden has been mostly silent about Tesla when promoting the benefits of electric vehicles. And that can likely be summed up in 3 letters. UAW. The United Auto Workers Union has broad concerns about what the industry-wide shift to EVs will mean for members' jobs, because electric vehicles have far fewer moving parts and require less labor to assemble. Ford estimates it takes about 30% less labor to make an electric vehicle than to make a traditional car.
Well, yeah, that's true. There's a lot less parts, and there's less need for maintenance, and but that's true for all electric vehicles, including the electric vehicles of Ford and General Motors. So that doesn't actually, as I understand it, account for the absence of him mentioning the T word, as he might call it, unless he watches our show. And, you know, it was 6 months ago, we were slamming Elon Musk for being involved in altcoins and some things that were not Bitcoin that a lot of people consider dangerous centralized garbage, like Doge, which is dangerous centralized garbage. So maybe Joe Biden is kind of a crypto Bitcoin man.
Well, certainly on the balance sheet of Tesla is over 40,000 Bitcoin. There's 0 Doge. So nevertheless, despite what he says, you know, the fact is his actions suggest he's a Bitcoiner. But this is not about a story about Doge. It's not a story about Tesla. It's not a story about Bitcoin or how much Bitcoin Elon Musk has. It's not a story about him, and it's not a story about any of that. What I want to point out is that, to me, here is a union, a powerful group of workers who don't want to have a car built which requires 30% less energy input, i.e. as many workers to build the unit. Now, normally you would think, like in capitalism, you want to do that. You want to advance and become more efficient. You would want to build whatever your production capacity, whatever you're producing, you would want to have fewer workers having to do that. So when I look at the fiat world, and then on the other side, I look at hyper-Bitcoinization, what I find is that the fiat world, look at America, is the top of that pyramid of the US dollar fiat world. There are 12 member banks of the Federal Reserve, right? Dallas, St. Louis, New York, San Francisco, all the 12 banks, they each have a governor, Fed governor. They have Federal Open Market Committee meetings. They have thousands of researchers and economists and staff. They have, then under them is the banking system. And you have KYC and AML and suspicious activity reports and thousands and thousands and thousands of documents. Just on the suspicious activity reports, all banks have to report any deposit close or near to or above $10,000. Something like 2 million of these suspicious activity reports are filed every year. So that's this old system which employs millions and millions and millions of people to keep track of this bureaucracy of the fiat system versus Bitcoin, where it's the consensus model operates on itself. The network operates 365 days a year, 24/7, without any needing to hire any sort of bureaucrat, any sort of researcher, any sort of inefficient system to try to maintain the value of that system.
Right. Well, the software revolution that's been around now for decades has transformed every industry and every company in the world. And car companies are, at the end of the day, software companies that run the robots, that run the assembly lines. And now with electric cars requiring every fewer parts, of course, those labor force would get even smaller. So the United Auto Workers Union, of course, would be cognizant of that and worried about that. And as you point out, you can apply it to the banking system. It requires a bureaucracy that's enormous. Millions of people, layered, a bureaucracy, which is completely disintermediated by Bitcoin. You don't need any of that for Bitcoin to work. But the march of software is not going to end, and the transformation of all industry is with us, whether people like it or not. The last industry in the world to be transformed by software was money, and Bitcoin rolled into town, and now money's been disintermediated or disrupted by this software, this protocol called Bitcoin. And of course, bankers hate it. Central bankers hate it. But let's talk facts. Within 10 years, all major central banks will be gone, and we're going to be in a post-central bank era.
Well, exactly. So that's money is now software. So money, it operates on its own, but it's also being maintained on its own. Like, obviously, Microsoft has software, and they can barely maintain it, right?
Well, look, it's important to keep something in mind here. The money that runs the Bitcoin software, the software that is the backbone, it's a decentralized protocol, and it's been in the works for 20 years. And it does something very, very special. It creates the hardest money ever that's unconfiscatable and it's uncensorable. And it separates for the first time money from state. Now, what does that mean on a practical basis? It means that a lot of the machinery of the state is no longer needed. So the state, those people who work in all those back offices and all those, even I would posit that the so-called industrial complex, military-industrial complex, is actually challenged by Bitcoin because what backs the dollar? The war machine that is the Pentagon. So if you don't need that anymore, then all those jobs are also going to be axed. So this is a transformation.
Well, it's a transformation, and that's the thing, is like Elon Musk is literally out there campaigning on Twitter asking the president to say my name, say my name, say my name. And we have the same thing with Bitcoin, right? The same here, the situation with Biden's pro-union, so he's going to side with the United Auto Workers who want the old combustion engine sort of cars because it requires 30% more of their workers. So they're naturally going to be want that, right? That's the classic. The Luddites are against the horse and buggy being replaced by the car sort of situation. So here we have the same thing with what happened with Bitcoin for the previous 10 years prior to El Salvador, which was like, say my name. They kept on saying blockchain instead. They refused to say Bitcoin because that was the threat that would replace them with a consensus algorithm run by software, maintained by global software coders.
I'll weigh into this with a theory of my own. So Joe Biden, throughout his career, he has remained loyal to those groups and those corporations that have funded his campaigns. And in the auto industry, there's the one meme that Joe Biden can lay claim to is riding with Biden. And it's a picture of him, I believe it's in a Corvette. A convertible Corvette, and that's a General Motors product. So I think in his mind, he's thinking he's very loyal to the General Motors product. He'll say Ford because that's the first major American car company. And then the newcomer, Tesla, I don't think he has any allegiance to Tesla whatsoever. So he's going to go with what he knows, and that would be General Motors and Ford.
Well, but he's going to confront, or whoever follows him will confront the same exact moment when the US dollar is replaced by Bitcoin. The disintermediation is happening, and the response you're seeing from central banks right now, they're trying to replace it with the CBDC, their central bank digital currencies, and that is just them hoping to maintain their high employment rate for their economist friends, for their MMT friends, for their money printer friends, because it takes a lot of work to print all that money, right? So they want to maintain that system. And so what I'm saying is when you look at the story about what is happening with Elon Musk and Tesla, that the president of the United States refuses to say his name because he requires 30% fewer workers than Ford or GM because they have, a more combustion engine business. So that's what we're going to see exactly with Bitcoin replacing fiat. It's going to happen regardless, but they're going to resist it in the same exact way as I laid out in this first headline here on the Keiser Report.
Right. I mean, it's an excellent point. So in the case of auto workers losing their jobs, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan in America, there's been a movement to disrupt organized labor. And organized labor has had a remarkable shrinkage over the past several decades. But when you're talking about replacing the dollar with Bitcoin, now you're talking about shrinking the federal government. And those are the folks that collect the taxes. And they're the ones that have the power to send the cops to your front door and put a gun to your head and demand taxes. So, but that's not going to help because Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. The deep state, federal government, the game is over. The sooner you learn how to code, the better. Or just write propaganda like Paul Krugman and get a job at North Korea.
Well, stay tuned for the second half where we continue our interview with William Soriano.
I'm looking forward to it. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to return to our conversation with William Soriano. He's a congressman for the La Union area of El Salvador, where Bitcoin City will one day be built very soon. He is with President Bukele's party, New Ideas, which is just recently had their 3-year anniversary. William, welcome back.
Thank you, Max. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we're having fun.
Yeah.
We were here in this very square back in November. And you showed me around, and I could tell that the vision of the country and the vision of the millennials of this country is one of infinite possibility of hope, which is very different than in other countries around the world. I know in my own country, in the United States, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of questions. People are feeling like their future's been robbed by the boomers, the boomers. Robbing the millennials. Here, it's the complete opposite. What do you say to that?
We have the youngest Congress in the whole world. Most of my colleagues are under 30. I just reached my 30s. And I think we inherit a country with so many problems that we just got tired of it. And we said to ourselves, now that we have the best leader, possibly, Nayib Bukele, we have to also step up as a generation and take action into solving those problems that we inherit from past generations.
Are you at the point, let me ask you this personally, are you at the point now in your life and in the country's history where you look at the past and you look at the Civil War and you're now thinking about it in the context of we had to go through hard times to get to good times? You know, there's a saying that hard times create hard men eventually create good times, and then the good times create soft men, and then the cycle repeats. But my question is this, William. Are you now at the point where you're thinking that everything had a reason to be, and the future is so bright that we're going to just blow people's minds with what we're doing here?
You know, we grew up believing that there was a reason for us to go to war back in the 80s and 90s. But once we get into the power and we discovered that the reasons were not real at all, that they were only for certain economic purposes for those elites, that's where people actually got really mad and deceived about these political classes that we just sent home, sent away. And right now, we look into the future and we see what our president has been doing locally, but also worldwide. Last week I was in Honduras, and as we participated in the new president's inauguration, the whole stadium, packed of Hondurans, began chanting, Nayib Bukele, Nayib Bukele. And that was just amazing, feeling that our president's presence, even though he was not there, could be felt, and also because of the example he's given world leaders on how to actually manage crisis, run a country, and step up for the people.
Right, I saw the video. It was very emotional. So in Honduras,
Yeah.
And they were celebrating the election of a new president. And so I guess a delegation from El Salvador was walking, and the crowd went crazy. And they're, Bukele, Bukele,
Yes.
because my understanding is that during the COVID pandemic,
Yes.
El Salvador was assisting in a big way, sending food and things
Vaccines.
to Honduras. But also, I think the idea of what is happening in El Salvador as an escape from business as usual, escape from the political
Yes.
puppet show, the people there are beginning to think maybe we're next.
Yes.
Are they the next?
Yes, actually, yes. That's the feeling we got. Honduras, they just wiped the ex-president out of the presidency because he represented what we wiped out in El Salvador, and people gathered, reunited, and mass voted.
Now,
for this new
when
president.
Kamala Harris was on walking, their chant erupted from the crowd that, my translation, I could be wrong, but they were saying, take your trash out. Take
Yes.
your trash out. They were referring to the previous regime and the puppet installed by America. And is that a correct translation? I'm not exactly sure.
Well, they were chanting, please take him back with you.
Okay,
Basically the same, right?
right.
But yes, I mean,
I added the trash bit myself.
yes, but
I gave it a little color there, a little spin.
it's basically the same. People actually got tired of him.
Right.
Because the way he ran the country, not for the people, but mainly for narcos
Yeah.
and elites. And that's what people don't like.
All right, so Honduras, do they have volcanoes?
They have a lot of mountains, but maybe I don't know if they have volcanoes or not.
They could be a candidate for volcano-type bonds. My question is this. So if El Salvador, they're introducing a volcano bond, they're going to possibly pay down all the IMF debt. They could become debt-free.
Well,
They could pay $24 billion of debt down. Is a country like Honduras going to look at that and say, hey, we want to make Bitcoin legal tender? Are
Also
they the next
Guatemala.
country to make Bitcoin legal tender?
Well, there's many more countries in the region. We've been talking about with Mexican congressmen. We've been talking about with congressmen from other countries in Central America who are very curious about what's going on in El Salvador. So I think there's going to be more countries looking into this option as we advance as El Salvador into the world goal we have. You know, let me just give you some data.
If you walked into Las Vegas and you saw 5 Central American countries on the board with odds of which one was going to be the next to make Bitcoin legal tender, and Honduras was on that board, would you pick Honduras?
I think so.
Let's talk about the church to my left. This is a very famous church.
Yes.
Tragically so.
Yes.
And,
this is
and
the
maybe give us a
cathedral.
little lesson about this.
This is the cathedral. This is where the remains of Monsignor Romero, which now was declared a saint by the Catholic Church, are laying here. He was killed by the right. He was killed and murdered for protecting people.
Yes, and to get back to your escape from bipartisanship, at the time during the Cold War, and you were saying El Salvador is a proxy for the Cold War, the poor that the priests represented were characterized as communists.
Yes.
And therefore they became the U.S. sent in the CIA hit squad, the death squads, and they assassinated.
Yeah, they were trained by the CIA.
Right.
On the Escuela de las Américas.
The School of the Americas.
Yes, that's how it's called.
Right, so the economic hitmen, which we know from John Perkins. We were recently called economic
I know,
hitmen.
I heard that. That's crazy.
Which is a foolish thing to say, because in fact, Bitcoin gets rid of the economic hitmen. Would you agree with that?
I do totally agree.
And let's talk a little bit more about the history of Central America. You know, there was a very famous figure going back to the 1800s. There's a statue of him not far from here about uniting the 5 Central American countries into a united federation, I guess. Is that back in play?
Francisco Morazan, that's who you're referring to, right?
Yes.
Francisco Morazan, he had the ideal that Central America had to be one country. Right now, we have the idea that Central America, even though we have borders, we can live like brothers, brotherhood, working, cooperating, as a real family, you know? And we already began with it. Our
Right, so
president,
there's economies of scale. There's
Yes.
65 million people in the region. With the volcano bonds, you're talking about $500 billion to $1 trillion economic boom, and El Salvador could be the Wall Street of Bitcoin.
What I was trying to say is that the political model that we started in El Salvador is beginning to expand to the whole region right now. And you can see it in Honduras with the footage. If you can show it to your audience, you're gonna see it, what's gonna happen. So we're going back in history with the same ideal of reunited Central America, but with different conditions, but with the same purpose.
Yes, right. The economies of scale. Geothermal energy, of course, is at the bedrock of this revolution in the volcano bonds. You've got a lot of it here.
We have plenty of it.
And I visited some of a geothermal plant, and I saw the actual Bitcoin miners.
I was trained there, you know? I was specialized in geothermal energy.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I know a bit more of all the potential El Salvador has to produce geothermal energy. We only explore maybe 20% of the potential we have. We are supplying energy to El Salvador, maybe 15 or 20% of the whole grid, but we still have plenty of it.
Right, so in Iceland, actually, you know, they use their geothermal energy to smelt aluminum. Then they export aluminum as a export for the good of the country. So here you're using this to create Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin
Exactly.
can then used as export currency, as currency all over the world, right?
And
So-
also to build infrastructure.
infrastructure.
And that's good. I mean, the best part of building Bitcoin City is that it's a very new model to the whole world, and it can be replicated in different countries.
Right, the president calls it the new Alexandria.
Exactly.
That you can replicate this model city anywhere in the world. There's no capital gains tax, no income tax, no payroll tax.
Exactly.
It's...
You've been there.
yeah, we went there. That's your region.
Yes, I was born there.
And you were born in there.
Yes, I represent that people.
And it has
They
the
elected
best
me.
shrimp in the world.
It has the best shrimp,
We had some yesterday. It is the best shrimp in the world.
the best views,
The best views,
the best weather,
the best weather for sure.
and the best water, seawater, beaches.
Well, you know, in El Zante, which is Bitcoin Beach, the property prices are already starting to boom. Are we going to see that over near Bitcoin
Yes.
City?
You better start buying your land there.
Better start buying.
Yeah, you as a foreigner, you can purchase land there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the GDP in this country, they just came out with 10, 11%. And it's looking like the next year is going to be much higher.
Exactly. We're just we're going to invest $1.5 billion in public infrastructure, for the people this year, 2022. That's the plan we have with our president. And we've been supporting all his plans because we know that we're just going in the right direction.
Right. Well, I know the volcano bonds are part of the story, big part of the story. You know, we're working very closely with the partners that have been put together for this. And that's going to be coming to market really in the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. And I think that'll be another huge leap for the country, for the economy, and for Bitcoin. So, William, thanks again for spending all this time with us. You're a busy congressman, and to give us this amount of time is really special for us. I want to thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
All righty. Okay, well, that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Once again, thanks to our special guest, William Soriano. Until next time, bye, y'all.